Okay, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you happen to be. So glad you could join us for the third edition of Opal Group's Learning and Development Virtual Summit. Just so you know, I'm Bobby Swartout, the conference director for the event. I'm going to be acting as the summit MC throughout the day, and just wanted to go over the few housekeeping items before we get right into the outstanding content we have lined up. In regards to the virtual platform, the agenda is located in the sessions tab at the top of the screen, which I'm sure you've already seen. You can kind of navigate into each session there by clicking on them to attend. And please also refer to the Know Before You Go packet that was emailed with the summit invite, give you further instructions on how to utilize the platform. And a couple of other quick pointers. You can feel free to jump into the lounge tab. And there you can see the other event attendees, and you can send them a private message if you want to chat with anybody registered for the event. And we also have a poll question in the lounge. It's about the resumption of live events. I'd appreciate it if everybody could hop in there at some point today, maybe during the break or in between sessions, and respond there, so we can get kind of an idea as to when some of you may or may not be able to actually travel to live events next year. We're starting to look into when we can go ahead and do that, kind of get away from virtual and get back into doing some live events. And keep in mind that whenever you do leave the sessions and go to messages or the exhibit booths or the lounge, you're going to need to jump back into the sessions to rejoin the presentation. And during the presentations and keynotes, there is going to be Q&A at the end of every session. So feel free to jump in with your questions at any time. You don't have to wait until the end to pose any questions you might have. We'll go ahead and get to those right when we get to the Q&A. So again, just feel free to put those throughout the presentation and in the panel discussion. And in between the sessions as well, and during the networking break that we're going to have coming up shortly, I'd also encourage everybody to go into the exhibit hall and check out our event sponsors. You just go in there and click on their booths, and there's some fantastic information with all of them about some of the new innovative platforms they have, upcoming webinars and white papers to share with your teams and industry colleagues. And for today, we have some really great content lined up, and the theme is going to be centered around best practices for cultivating agility, quality, and resilience, kind of learning in an age of disruption, if you will. And as we're all aware, when looking into L&D trends now and into 2021, it's critical for L&D and talent leaders to implement strategies that kind of cultivate a distinct culture. Most importantly, that's fully aligned with brand identity and business priorities right now. And this applies to all your digital and online strategies, executive and leadership development, DE&I conversations, synchronous and asynchronous learning, and other initiatives to improve the value and impact of L&D. So having said all that, let's go ahead and jump in right now to the great content we have with the opening keynote speaker. The opening keynote today is with Heidi Brandow. She's the Vice President of Global Learning and Talent Development at Palo Alto Networks. She's a learning and leadership expert who you'll clearly see throughout the presentation. She's long been fascinated by what drives ordinary people to deliver truly extraordinary results. She spent her entire career working across multiple industries and on the ground in more than 30 countries, learning what truly works and what doesn't work, to unleash learning and connect people to what matters most at work and in life. And today, she dedicates her time alongside her brilliant colleagues, channeling that learning and expertise into creating the workforce of the future, one in which everyone can thrive. And Heidi's going to be talking to us today about FLEXLearn. It's a really unique program. I'm excited to hear about it. They're talking about reinventing work for today and tomorrow. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Heidi. Heidi, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Bobby. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you good.
Okay, I am going to attempt to share the desktop here. Let me know when you can see.
Yep, it's all good to go.
All right, perfect. So thanks, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and talk about what the workforce of the future may look like and what it's looking like today. So no surprise, earlier this year, we all experienced a significant amount of disruption, right? We went into when the pandemic hit, we all went into a new and different way of working, and we were prepared to varying degrees to meet the challenges of that was presented to us by that. And I think a lot of people experienced that in very different ways. Some of us experienced that a lot like we used to experience this, or many of us still experience this. We went into a state of maybe a different state of readiness. So we went into this state where we were experiencing a problem that we had never encountered before. So all of a sudden, we went into a state where this is a problem we didn't know how to handle. And so organizations dealt with it in a couple of different ways. So, the days when some of our organizations went into it, and we kind of went into a holding pattern, and we said, okay, we want to go into this and we need to back off and kind of go into that space where we will wait and see. So some organizations, I think everybody did what was right for their own business, right? And no criticism to be had in that at all. But some organizations, we saw things like mass layoffs, and it created a huge amount of uncertainty for everyone. And a lot of things, we go into our colleagues and friends who study neuroscience. This created huge challenges for all of us in well-being. We watch depression skyrocket. We watch, in addition to the physical health and well-being challenges that we've been dealing with, we also watch our mental health and well-being take a nosedive, not just in the United States, but indeed around the world. And these are challenges that we all need to deal with. And organizations dealt with this in a couple of different ways. Some of us dealt with it by saying, we need to pull back and go into kind of a shelter and protect mode, right? So we watch things like organizations pull back from their performance, their regular performance cycles. And so they canceled across Silicon Valley. A lot of them canceled their performance cycles. They said, we're not going to do that, partially because they didn't want to put additional stress on their employees. They also did not want to pay out bonus and promotions in a time of financial uncertainty. But we watched a lot of organizations handle it that way. At Palo Alto Networks, we looked at it from a different perspective, and our CEO really said, this is not the time for us to pull back on the things that create more certainty. We need to remember, and my colleague and friend Liz Wiseman reminds us that actually the human mind is built for challenge and for growth. And when we go into periods of uncertainty and disruption, we all do it. We go, when something goes awry in your team or something, even in your personal life, what you want to do is you want to suck up that control to yourself, right? And you want to say, I'm not sure what's happening there, so I want to dive in, and we go into kind of a micromanagement mode. We as leaders do this all the time. And what we at Palo Alto Networks did is we said, we need to actually use this as an opportunity for us to put that control into the hands of the employees. We need to give them certainty and challenge where they're feeling a lack of it. And that is a means for us to return from this panic mode that people are feeling, maybe back into a new sense of normal, a new sense of normalcy and control. So how can we get to a place where the workforce of the future is, when we return to whatever a new normal is, and I think we've all tired a bit, become a bit fatigued with hearing about a new normal, but we will return to a new state of normal, and it will not look a lot like what we experienced, prior to the pandemic, and we think that's a good thing. And so rather than sit around and wring our hands and think and worry about what that would be, we seized the opportunity to begin to imagine and invite some of our colleagues and companies, like-minded companies, to help us imagine and co-create what that workforce, workplace of the future would look like. And so, we thought about, driven a lot by our CEO, Nikesh, we thought about, the workplace hasn't changed a lot in the last, since the Industrial Revolution. It hasn't changed a ton. Work employees have been told when to show up for work, what they would do when they got there, how they would do their work, and it hasn't changed as much as technology has enabled it to do. And so, while our lives have become enriched by technology, and our lives have become enriched by it, the workforce, employees haven't necessarily, the workplace hasn't necessarily benefited in the ways that it could from that. So as we looked at how we could navigate this uncertainty, we thought that there were three things that we actually needed to do. We needed, so that to help our employees really navigate this uncertainty effectively and come out of this on the other side. And it wasn't without, I would be disingenuous if I pretended that we weren't all sitting there also biting our nails when we went into suddenly working from home, wondering if our teams were going to be productive. But we took some very bold steps. And the first thing was to alleviate the uncertainty that employees were feeling. So we took some bold steps to do that, like first committing to no layoffs related to, no COVID related layoffs in this fiscal year. Then we said we need to accelerate our employee connections with one another. What are the multitude of ways that we have, despite the suddenly distributed and very disrupted workforce? How can we accelerate that employee connection? And then what are the ways that we can amplify employee choice? So how can we return a sense of control and connection to our employees in the midst of all this chaos and lack of control that they're feeling, so they can get back that sense of autonomy and connectedness, and maintain a new sense of control and normalcy. So we looked into that, and out of these choices was born what we're calling FLEXWORK. So it's a way of creating an employee-centric way of working that puts employee choice and flexibility at the heart of every interaction and touch point and milestone in the employee contract. So it's really reimagining and redesigning that employee contract, that contract that an employer and employee have with one another. I think the previous social contract that employees and employers had with one another was a sense of, you give us your loyalty and your effort and your work, and we will give you a sense of security and financial excuse me, we'll give you the financial impact for that work. You'll give us your work and we'll pay you for that. And this is a reimagining of that. This is saying we are going to, in that first, in that old way of doing, or the current way of doing things, that contract was a little bit, it was a bit of a false contract, if we're really honest with each other, because that security, if we're honest, is not always there. Like layoffs we are at will employees, at least in the United States. And you can come to you can give your work to your efforts and your knowledge and your best to your employer, and the employer has the option to end your employment based on whatever reasons that, or a certain series of reasons that fall within, legal ramifications. So if the employer has downturn, so that security is tenuous at best, is my point. And so what we want to do then is that's never going to go away. And so what we want to do is create an employer contract that says, actually, we want to remove some of that uncertainty that employees feel. And while we can't do anything about the macroeconomic impact that employees feel, what we can do is put some of the voice back in their hands, and we can give you a way to design a working environment that works for you. And so what that looks like for us is we're looking at putting flexibility at the heart of the employee. So at every state, you come into the organization, and what we're working with some of our colleagues to design, is a scenario in which the employee chooses from location, benefits, learning, performance. At each stage, the employee choice becomes paramount. And at each stage of the employee journey, the employee choice becomes paramount to how that employee designs their workplace and their contract. And in return for that, they give their highest and best efforts and contributions. They design the workplace that they want to engage in, and it's an amazing experience for them. That helps us to attract the very best talent. It helps us to retain and develop the very best talent, and in return, we get their highest and best contributions for that. So this looks like location flexibility. This looks like throughout the onboarding process, you have the opportunity to customize what works for you throughout that experience. Really a different way of looking at performance and how you set goals and how you engage with your peers throughout that process. And then the one that I'm most excited about and responsible for is that learning and development, FLEXLearn, where you have a range of opportunities, and you have, instead of a fixed path of development, a one-size-fits-all approach to learning, you have the opportunity to customize, determine what it is that you want to learn, how you want to learn it, when you want to access it, and probably the biggest differentiator is what are the ways in which you want to consume it that's most meaningful to you, that will take you where you want to go. And you customize that learning journey that will take you to a vibrant and robust career within Palo Alto Networks and beyond. So what this looks like for us is a reimagining of the learning space. So gone are the days of that one size fits all and a competency-based approach where we say we're going to make you an expert in these specific learning skills or specific competencies, and your expertise, which we know atrophies very quickly now in this day and age, and we expand that out to personalized, customized, dynamic learning paths that are based on a variety of things: your role, your preferences, your career aspirations, and then we take that into a blended approach that is a mix of online learning, virtual, and on-the-job learning. It takes into consideration a wide variety of inclusive learning that is both environments that, of course, there's the formal learning, but also coaching, on-the-job learning with your colleagues, peer-to-peer learning. It's really tied to your performance. So the goals that you set have a big play into that, and a strong tie into the feedback that you're receiving with your peers, from your employees, or from your employer, from your, sometimes even from your clients and your stakeholders. And then that idea that the learning that you customize for yourself is much broader than a formal program that's created just by your learning and development department. It is customized into a much wider variety of resources and venues. So then we go back, you take that into consideration, you grow beyond that, and then the cycle starts over and broadens into your broader path. So it really creates that culture of learning that we're all looking for, and that we've been talking about for years, and it broadens it into the path where the employee has the choice at heart. It's an exciting way to do things. It's no shortage of challenge. As I've talked to my colleagues across the organization or across the industry, I get one of two reactions. One, they're like, wow, this is amazing that you have the opportunity to do it. They're so lucky to be able to work in this space. And the other reaction I get is, you're crazy. How could you possibly do this? It's not scalable, and it's not possible to do this in a way for, you're only at about 10,000 people. How could you possibly personalize learning in that way? I think it's not as hard as we think as we move into it, but we're not doing it on our own. We have a coalition of people coming together. We have several companies. We started with 5 forward-thinking organizations that our CEO reached out to some, like I mentioned, like-minded companies that are coming together to think through these ideas, to say, we're going to be flexible and adaptable. We're going to focus on employee choice, and then we will individualize these things where they're appropriate. And then, we're going to embrace the technology that enables us to do this. We're starting in these areas that are around, leadership, performance and productivity, and technology, of course. And then we're focusing really on development, location, and culture. But we're working together and bringing this coalition. It started with 5. I think we opened it up, announced it at Zoomtopia, because Zoom is one of our partner organizations. It started with 5. I think we're at more than 600 companies have signed up into this coalition to help us think through these ideas and join together. And we are open sourcing these things and sharing it out. If you're interested, you can go to flexwork.live and read more about it and learn what we're doing. We published our first case study. We'll publish these case studies quarterly. We published our first one, case studies on learning. And then I think the next one we're going to focus on in the next quarter is really on well-being, because this is where we are really needing to focus. And as we think through all of the things that are happening, we started with virtual learning and we're going into well-being because this is really top of mind for everyone. So it's an exciting thing that's happening. I'm really excited to be part of it and would love to, really continue this journey with more people in this community and beyond. Questions?
Yeah, actually, there are a few questions, Heidi. Thanks so much for the presentation again. I'm not sure if you could share this or not, but what's been the response to the move towards increased employee choice? I mean, what are the results you're seeing, if any?
Yeah, so we have seen some early and significant results. So when we went into the pandemic, within the organization, we had some, like everyone, our employees were used to being in together, and we had very strong employee culture. And actually, we just did a pulse survey a few weeks ago to, similar to what you were asking is when do you want the office to open up, or when the office opens up, what percentage of people want to come back? And we decided we would ask some sentiment questions around belonging and how are people feeling despite this. And we were seeing incredibly high rates in the 80s and 90s, an increased sense of employee belonging, despite the fact that we had been distributed, right? So we were asking what percentage of people are clear on their goals and milestones, are having those one-on-one connections and feel an increased sense of belonging. And we were seeing much higher rates in that, despite the fact that we were in this distributed environment. So that was really high. And our performance results externally, we're getting really huge response to this, right? Like I mentioned in the, I don't think we anticipated that we would have such an overwhelming response to FLEXWORK, but it's top of mind for everyone, largely because of the location. I think driven by location, but learning is a tough one. Everybody's got to go into virtual learning, and not everyone was as prepared for it as we could have been, right?
Yeah, no doubt about that. So, I mean, I know you guys kind of started it off, and obviously you're doing really well. Are the other organizations in the FLEXWORK Coalition doing as good as you are? And if so, are they following a similar approach? And are you partnering with them at all?
I think, several of them, several of the organizations everybody's gone into virtual learning. And so not everybody is going down this same path of personalizing learning to the degree that we are. So we were already going down the path of personalized learning. This is a vision that our CEO has had for quite some time. So I think it kind of predated the learning piece predated FLEXWORK. He hates the idea that you have to sit in a class and learn from a cohort with everybody else at the same pace. It didn't make sense to him. And so when I was hired, that was, something that he wanted to disrupt anyway. So we've been on that path a little bit longer, but yes, we are all going down a path to figure out how can we disrupt and shift learning. But I think we are probably taking the personalization piece of that a little bit farther. We might be a little bit farther down the path on the personalization, but we're absolutely sharing everything that we're learning. We don't have all the answers yet, obviously, but we're absolutely sharing everything that we learned, good, bad, and ugly, with each other and with the broader group, because this is about creating a better world, not about just creating more successful companies.
Yeah, and you mentioned several times there the personalized learning, which is obviously critical right now, particularly for engagement and everything. If you could kind of share, where do you start to personalize the learning?
Yeah, so for us, it started with what do you need to do you start with the role itself. So we are looking at, what are the individual roles that, where do you have scale in roles? So what are the core capabilities that people would need for your most critical roles? And then what are preferences? And then you start with assessments. So how could people, much like if you go into anything these days and you create an avatar, what are the ways in which people would want to personalize things for themselves? So you would look at things like, what are their geography? What is their role? What are their interests? What are their preferences? And you begin to create things that would help them to differentiate for themselves. So you create, how do I differentiate? And then how do I create groups of differentiation that will enable me to create paths of similarity?
All right. So is that kind of the answer for a question that had come up? I was going to ask you about giving a practical example of a traditional global program. How would you personalize a traditional global program?
Yeah, so I think we are doing, I think we're a little short on time, but I think what we're doing with, so for our IND, so diversity, inclusion, and belonging, right now we're taking a wide variety of our core content, and we're saying, here are the things that we want you to know. So we have the what are the key messages and the key skills that we want to develop. We're giving people the opportunity to assess themselves on where are you with respect to these. What are the things that you are then most interested in? And then where are the places in which you need to grow? And then they take those and then they create a where do you need to grow? And what are the intersection points between what do you need to learn? What is your interest? And where's your opportunity to apply these skills? And then we give them, and now in what way do you want to learn about these things? So do you want to attend keynotes? Do you want to dive into peer-to-peer conversation? Do you want to do you want to read about it? So then we give you further the opportunity to say, what do you want to learn? When do you want to learn it? And then in what way do you want to learn? And so in that way, you're creating not just your path, but you're also the means by which you will develop those skills and capabilities.
So lots of choices and lots of questions right there. So now we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit here. So what's the biggest concern you have about this, the coalition and the program moving forward?
Yeah, the biggest concern that we have right now is just we've gotten so many, as soon as we launched it, I was a little bit, my first concern was like, how are we going to get people to opt in? And it turns out that was the wrong concern. My bigger concern is like, now how can we build it fast enough? Because getting people to opt in has not been the problem. Everybody wants in. And now it's like, how can we develop that wide variety of resources to meet the demand? So that's my biggest concern right now is how do we build it fast enough to meet the demand? So previously in the old model, I was knocking down, trying to get butts in seats or whatever you want to call it. And now I have kind of the opposite approach, and I worried about it because with everybody doing this face to face, Zoom 100% of the time, we were like, well, Zoom people, it's going to be learning fatigue and whatever. But because we've given people choice and we haven't said, we've made things voluntary. So we haven't said you have to do this. It's not compliance driven. We've put people in choice. We've given them all kinds of options. And when you create opportunity and invitation and it almost generates its own demand. And then people are like, this is actually something that's going to help me drive my business and my learning. Now people are opting in at a much higher level than they ever have before.
All right, so I think we got time for one more question. And since the future's still so uncertain, I mean, we've got spikes popping up all over the place again now. So, having created this program and had some success with it, what excites you the most about the potential of FLEXLearn going forward?
I mean, that's just it. I think it is the potential. Like, it's so untapped at this point. We don't necessarily, I think we're just beginning to see the potential of where it could go. And really what excites me is how engaged our learners are. And as we begin to co-create this with our learners and, other colleagues in the industry, I think what excites me is like, where could this possibly take us? And I really think that we are on the cusp of a whole new way of learning and engaging with corporate learning and development. So our field is ripe for disruption, and I think we're beginning to see it. And it's really exciting to be like on the edge of pioneering what that looks like for our field. So that's probably what excites me the most about this.
Outstanding. So yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm curious to see. I'd like to check in with you in about 6 months and kind of see where you are now. I bet you there's all kinds of updates that are going to be coming. So again, thanks, Heidi. That was a fantastic discussion on kind of personalizing the employee experience, particularly in all three critical areas of location and benefits and learning. So I want to take this opportunity on behalf of everybody here to thank you so much for joining us, Heidi.
We're excited about it. Thanks for having me.